Trevor Story has a lot to prove for the Boston Red Sox in 2025, but he's not the only one on the team with a lot of pressure on him heading into the season.
You are Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Red Sox, your daily Boston Red Sox podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Gabby, former ESPN social media associate and current host of the Boston Balling podcast as well. And I am here to bring you the latest in all things Boston Red Sox, Monday through Friday, straight to your favorite podcast feed. And the best part is it is all completely free. So you might as well take advantage of that because Locked On is your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. Today is Monday, but do not worry because Thanksgiving is right around the corner, which usually means for a lot of us, no work for a few days. So definitely looking forward to that nice little Thanksgiving break coming up. I love Thanksgiving, great time of year. The fall is the best, and Thanksgiving is kind of when you feel like it's nearing the end of the fall and heading into winter. So you want to embrace everything about that weekend. And usually family traditions wise, the day after Thanksgiving is always when we break out the Christmas decorations and we start looking for a Christmas tree. So that season all starts for me very, very soon. But first, Thanksgiving and stuffing my face in some delicious food. And I hope you are doing the same on that day. Day well spent with lovely family and friends. And because we're getting close to Thanksgiving and then shortly after that, Christmas and the New Year and all this stuff going on, the 2025 MLB season will be here before we know it. I mean, players will be suiting up for spring training sooner than we think, and it goes by really fast. And when we're thinking about the Boston Red Sox and a team that has very much been average the last couple seasons and hasn't been pushed to the absolute max that they could be pushed to and hasn't been formulated to be a team that can contend for a postseason spot. We want them to be able to do that in 2025. We want the narrative to be changed of Red Sox ownership being cheap and not being willing to invest in the current roster that they have in front of them. But in order for them to be able to do that and switch the narrative for the Red Sox organization, they're going to need some help from the players too, because at the end of the day, the players are the ones on the field. They are the ones performing. So on today's show, I'm going to be talking about Red Sox players with the most to prove on this current roster, and I am ranking them in order with how I feel that they have the most to prove, with the player having the most to prove being number one, and that to me is Trevor Story. Now, when you think about Story and his time in a Boston Red Sox uniform so far, it hasn't exactly been up to par with what the Red Sox have wanted it to be, because injuries have set him back a lot. And when he was playing in a lot of games, he wasn't putting together the numbers at the plate that the Red Sox wanted him to. Now, in 2024, he only took 94 at-bats because he played in the first few games of the season. Then he went down with an injury trying to make a diving play at shortstop in a game. It was actually really scary to see it. But he went down with an injury that he was unable to come back from until the last month of the season. And then he was reactivated and he was able to get himself going a little bit at the plate. He ended up batting .255 on the season over those 94 at-bats with 24 hits and 2 home runs. He scored 8 runs and drove in 10, and he stole 6 bases. So he had a really well-rounded resume in terms of what he was doing to be productive offensively for this Red Sox team. His on-base percentage was a 340, slugging percentage was a 394, and OPS was a 733. So for somebody who missed a lot of the season, that really was not that bad in terms of numbers for him. And it's because he was able to string together some really nice at-bats in that last month of the season when he came back from injury. But that is the biggest thing about this right now is how legitimate is that? That version of Trevor Story that we saw in the last month of the season, we haven't really seen at all prior to that with this Boston Red Sox team during his tenure. We haven't seen him really look fully confident at the plate. We haven't seen him be able to make a lot of hard contact. He was swinging and missing a lot and wasn't really coming through the majority of the time in key situations when he was up at the plate. And that can be demoralizing for a player. And I think for him, he was starting to get extremely frustrated that things weren't clicking for him offensively. And he kept saying that he wanted to show Red Sox fans that he is and can be the player that they wanted him to be when they signed him. And in that situation, he came back from injury at the end of 2024. And I think he said, I want to put the league on notice in this last month of the season. I want to make an impression on the Red Sox so that they can at least be excited about the player that they are getting next year. And he certainly did do that. And he showed some promise at the plate. And this is a guy who, at the end of the 2023 season, was really upset and frustrated with himself and said he wanted to get to the point where Red Sox fans are really excited about having him there, that he knew he had more in the tank and more to prove and could contribute more than he was contributing. And for Red Sox fans, we appreciated the fact that he recognized that he had been struggling offensively in Boston and he wanted to come out in 2024 and have a big year at the plate. But unfortunately, the baseball gods had other plans and kept him sidelined with an injury for the majority of that season. But the thing is, with him being out, the Red Sox struggled significantly more on defense. And I knew that was going to happen because he's kind of the glue of the Red Sox infield. He makes the plays that are more difficult. He is the one who keeps it as one cohesive unit defensively because he has one of the best gloves in the game at his position. And that is the biggest reason why the Red Sox wanted to bring him here was because of his defense at shortstop. But then you looked at his numbers offensively, and it was hard to justify putting him in this higher up tier of Red Sox players because he wasn't able to come through on the offensive side. And the best players are able to be productive both offensively and defensively. So he has a lot to prove in 2025 because he wasn't able to have the season in 2024 that he wanted to have, this big year where he had high expectations for himself and wanted to be one of those consistently strong hitters in the Red Sox lineup. So he is hoping to have that season in 2025. And that's what Red Sox fans are looking for from him. He needs to have a big year at the plate in order for Red Sox fans to feel okay with him being the guy at shortstop for the foreseeable future until Marcelo Meyer is ready to come up, because that is going to be the plan. I don't see them shifting him to second base right now. I only see that being a possibility down the road if Meyer does come up and they still have Story's contract on the books, and maybe they move him to second base at that point if they don't have their franchise guy at second base by then, which very well could be Vaughn Grissom or Christian Campbell. So they're in this situation where Trevor Story is the guy for right now, at least until Marcelo Meyer comes up. And he needs to show us in 2025 that he is going to be a great bridge guy to Meyer, and that we're not going to be sitting there counting down the days until Meyer comes up because we don't want to deal with Story anymore. We want it to be a situation where, yeah, we're really excited for when Meyer comes up because he's a very highly regarded prospect and one of the best in baseball. And the Red Sox are lucky to have him, but we also enjoy having Trevor Story here. So we want that to be the mindset going into 2025, is that Trevor Story needs to show us more. He needs to show us that he can be a guy who can battle back from injuries, and that missing almost a full season in 2024 didn't completely backtrack his game in this gigantic way. He needs to come back in 2025 and cut down on the strikeouts and show us that he has the ability to be a guy who can hit consistently. In the last 28 days of the season, he did bat to a 270 average. So he was playing decently in that last month, and he was hitting actually better than he was early on in the season before he got injured. So that's why his overall batting average was a 255. But in the last month of the season when he returned, he was hitting pretty well. He hit 276 at home on the year compared to 246 on the road. So not a crazy discrepancy there, but definitely could get his road numbers up a little bit higher in order for him to be a little bit more of a successful hitter. But he definitely needs to cut down on the strikeouts and just be able to hit the ball more and make contact, even if it's a weak ground ball, because he has a shot to beat that out and get to first base. He needs to try to find ways to make contact so that he's at least having productive at-bats. And with Story, there were a lot of gloomy at-bats where it would result in a strikeout, but the pitcher wouldn't throw that many pitches to him. So it didn't feel like the at-bat by Story really got a whole lot done. And that's what I don't want to see in 2025. I want to see a confident hitter that starts to pick up where he left off in that last month of 2024 and adds to that even more and just continues to develop as an even better player and stronger hitter for a Boston Red Sox team that really needs him to hit well in 2025. So to me, he's at the top of the list of people who have something to prove in 2025 because he has had seasons where he's been fantastic at the plate before coming to Boston, and we know what he can do, and we have yet to see that. So we really need to see that from him going into this upcoming season. Hopefully he can stay healthy to show us that. Coming up, we're going to move over to the pitching side and talk about a pitcher on this current Boston Red Sox roster that has a ton to prove in 2025. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Make sure you're maximizing your experiences on FanDuel because you really can win a ton of money if you do so. And I'm talking life-changing money if you do it the right way. If the Boston Red Sox do things the right way, they can be a contending team in 2025. It's totally possible. I see a path for it. They just need to execute the right way, obviously by going out and making the right moves to acquire players this offseason. But also on top of that, they have to have their current players give their best effort and pan out to what they want them to be. And I talked a lot about Trevor Story and how he has a lot to prove for this Boston Red Sox team in 2025. But another player who also has something to prove is Brayan Bello. I felt like what we got from him in 2024 wasn't everything that he has. Now, just a reminder, he finished the season with a 4.49 ERA and a 14-8 record over 30 games that he pitched in. He did pitch a total of 162.1 innings and recorded 153 strikeouts. Brayan Bello has never been a huge strikeout guy, doesn't average that many strikeouts per 9 innings. And that's something that's been holding him back from getting into that next level in terms of reliability among Red Sox pitchers. And the biggest thing with Bello that I saw in 2024 that concerned me was his inconsistency and not really fully knowing which pitches he should be using in order for him to be successful. And in the second half of the season, he started to figure that out a little bit more because we saw a difference in him in the first half versus the second half. And it was really nice to see that because the first half of the season, he was all over the place. You didn't really know what version of him you were getting. But in the second half of the season, you felt like he was more productive and he was giving it a little bit more. And one of the biggest things to me that stood out that helped him succeed more in the second half was because he added his fastball back into his pitch arsenal more frequently, because Andrew Bailey early on in the season was pushing for all of the pitchers to move away from their four-seam fastball and not use it as much unless it's a must needed situation where it only makes sense to use that pitch. But he was encouraging them to throw the off speed stuff a lot. And I think that threw off Brayan Bello because he would rely so much on his fastball as a knockdown pitch for him that it was a weird adjustment for him. But then I noticed that he started incorporating it a little bit more into his arsenal in the second half of the season. And I feel like that helped lead to some second half success for him. Now, when you think about the Red Sox pitching staff right now, the starting rotation especially, you have Bello, you have Tanner Houck, you have Cutter Crawford, who I still think could be traded this offseason. I'm not ruling that out yet. You have Lucas Giolito, who didn't even pitch at all in 2024, so you don't really know what he's going to be. And then you have some room for shuffling things around. Nick Pivetta likely won't accept the qualifying offer from the Red Sox and become a free agent, so he probably won't be starting in this rotation. But there are still some question marks surrounding the starting rotation right now. And Brayan Bello doesn't have to be a question mark, and I hope he isn't a question mark. Brayan Bello is a pitcher who needs to know how to get the job done more consistently. And what I saw from him in the second half of the season is what we need to see more of. He had a lot more command of the strike zone. He was able to shut down guys a little bit more and stretch himself a little bit deeper into games. What we saw in the first half was not the type of starter we need from a guy who at one point we were having a conversation about potentially being a future ace in Major League Baseball. We need to see more from him. And the question with him now becomes, which version of him are we going to get in 2025? Are we going to get the first half version of Bello that struggled a lot and wasn't able to consistently get the job done when he was out there, and we almost prepared for a meltdown situation whenever he was on the mound? Or are we going to see the second half guy who started to turn things around and started to look a lot better in the second half and was more aware and was able to lock down and get more outs? That's the biggest question. And that's why he has a lot to prove for the Boston Red Sox in 2025, because this is big for him. I mean, the Red Sox extended him. And when you extend a player, the last thing that you want is for that player to not pan out. The last thing that you want is for that player that you extend to then go out there and not perform at the highest level. So there's a lot of pressure on the Red Sox too for him to perform, because from an organizational standpoint, it would be a really bad look for them if they extended this guy and then he goes out there and doesn't perform up to the expectations of what that contract extension was supposed to provide. So from the Red Sox standpoint, there's a lot of pressure on him to perform. And from a personal standpoint for him, he doesn't want to be looked at as a 4 or 5 starter. He wants to be looked at as a top of the rotation type of guy. And he still has work to do to get to that. And I think he knows that. But for him, he has a lot to prove to show Red Sox fans that he can be more consistent on the mound, and to show the organization, hey, I can be relied upon every 5th day when it's my start, and I am going to be one of those lockdown pitchers that you throw in that 1-2 punch at the top of the rotation. And he knows Tanner Houck was the no doubt best starter the Red Sox had in 2024, most consistent, the guy we really didn't have to worry about as much, and the guy that Red Sox fans knew that more often than not they could rely on to get the job done. we don't feel that way about Brayan Bello. We just didn't see enough circumstantially to feel confident in him being a guy that could shut guys down and could go out there and perform at the highest level in 2024. And I saw a lot more confident version of Bello in 2023 than I did this past season. The 2023 version of Bello that we saw generally had lockdown stuff. And I remember at one point during the 2023 season talking on this show about Brayan Bello's potential to eventually be an ace for this Boston Red Sox pitching staff. And his 2024 season did not indicate that he has that potential. And one thing he's going to have to work through is the adjustments. And now that Andrew Bailey has been the pitching coach for a full season, and he's a little bit more acclimated to Bello, and Bello is more acclimated to him and his coaching style. Hopefully Bello can now adapt a little bit better and go into 2025 feeling a little bit more comfortable, knowing and understanding who the guy is that's going to be guiding him through the season on the mound. And hopefully he feels like he can trust him and his strategy a little bit. And that Andrew Bailey trusts Bello when it comes to his arsenal and understanding his strengths and weaknesses in pitches that he throws. So there is lots to prove for him because there's a question mark surrounding him. And this past season left us all sitting there wondering, who really is Brayan Bello as a pitcher? Is he a guy we can count on or not? And with where the Red Sox are at right now, when you're thinking about the season that they had in 2024 and them literally being an average baseball team for the season, you think about the main thing that held them back, and that was the pitching, whether it was the bullpen blowing games or the starters not being able to pitch deep into a game and it throwing off Alex Cora's rotations when it comes to who he wants to throw out of the pen. There were lots of pitching issues. So the last thing that the Red Sox could really afford right now is question marks surrounding a pitcher who they trusted enough to offer an extension to, that he accepted for him to go out there and not perform. That would be a huge letdown for the Red Sox community. So it's really important that he buckles down in 2025 and pitches like he earned and deserved that contract, and pitches like a guy who can be in the conversation for a top of the rotation guy, even if not next year, for years after that, if he continues to show improvement and shows reliability when he's on the mound. That is what we are looking for from him, and the pressure is on Bello to be able to do just that. So hopefully this offseason he works on certain pitches in his arsenal to increase his chances of performing better on the mound, and that we can turn around and have a conversation about Bello that's completely different than what we're having right now. But until he becomes more consistent and we see the second half of 2024 version of Brayan Bello come out of the gates in 2025, I cannot feel super confident with him on the mound. So hopefully he does have a big 2025 season, but he's definitely one of the players with the most to prove. And after this, I'm going to be talking about a player who was cause for a lot of discussion, mostly for the good, in 2025 coming up. The season could be big for him. If you're ever looking for good deals on concert tickets, comedy shows, sporting events, you name it, Game Time has it and is the place for you. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. There are so many games coming up. For example, I'm a big college basketball fan, so looking at Game Time earlier today, I saw lots of tickets available for UConn men's basketball games at great prices, and the prices for their games have gone up since they are now back-to-back national champions, which is great for me, but their tickets have been more expensive this year because of it. But I've seen ticket prices that are very reasonable for their games on Game Time. Curation makes it easier to save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. if you use Game Time Picks. And it also gives you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy, so you can ensure that you're selecting good seats for you and that you don't have an obstructed view. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Game Time absolutely has you covered for all your ticketing needs. I literally don't use any other ticketing vendors anymore. I literally just use Game Time because it saves me so much money compared to other ticketing vendors. So it's so worth it for you too. In looking ahead to the 2025 Boston Red Sox season, there are players that have a lot to prove going into this year. And one player who was really intriguing this past season, but definitely could show a little bit more, is Ceddanne Rafaela. Now, Rafaela signed an extension with the Red Sox, which some might say was premature, but the contract extension ultimately came because of his stellar defense. He had a 975 fielding percentage for the Red Sox in 2024 after playing in 152 games and 444.1 innings. Now, for him, he had 489 opportunities and 297 putouts. He only made 12 errors on the year, and that Fenway outfield is not super easy to play. So that kind of says a lot that he was pretty efficient out there, and it's very tough to play back there at Fenway Park. Assists, he had 180 on the year. So basically, outfield assist, meaning that he is helping to ensure that there's an out on that play. So he is a fantastic defender. And not only did he make an impact defensively in the outfield, but also when he played shortstop, because the Red Sox would switch him back and forth between shortstop and the outfield depending on need and who was in the lineup that day. They would kind of stick him in either spot. And those stats that I just read to you are his overall stats for the entire season. And Fenway is a very difficult outfield, like I mentioned, but even so, being able to take Trevor Story's spot at shortstop made the defense in the infield a lot cleaner. And that's huge because the Red Sox as a team struggled defensively when Story went down, and they made lots of small mistakes that cost them games more often than they should have. They were in that situation of poor defense giving up free runs more often than they absolutely should have been. And for Rafaela to come into the fold and be able to take Story's position at shortstop while he's injured and play there effectively says a lot about his value to a team, especially on the defensive end. Now, on the offensive side of the ball, he batted 246 on the year, over 544 at-bats. He recorded 134 hits and 15 home runs with 70 runs scored, 75 RBIs, and 19 stolen bases. He also had an on-base percentage of 274, a slugging percentage of 390, and an OPS of 664. So he's a very versatile player. He does have speed, which is proven in those 19 stolen bases. He was one of those fast players in the Red Sox lineup. So it was him, Jarren Duran, and David Hamilton that all have plus speed that when they were on the base paths would give an opposing pitcher trouble. So that's definitely a positive to Rafaela's game that he brings to this Red Sox team, is that speed and ability to steal lots of bases. Defensively, he obviously is fantastic, but his numbers at the plate didn't wow me. Yes, he had a decent season, but he could do more offensively. And if this kid is able to take off offensively, he will be one of the best players in the sport because of the versatility and everything that he provides. And you saw the conversations that Jarren Duran was put in this year, potential MVP candidate. You know, he was All-Star Game MVP. hit a huge home run in that game and really made a name for himself this past season because he was able to do it all. He had the speed, he had plus defense, he had plus offense. So everything that Jarren Duran did on the field was a plus side for the Boston Red Sox and helped them be a better baseball team. And that is my goal for Rafaela too, is for him to not be as much of an automatic out in the 9 hole. And granted, he definitely had moments where he would come up big, and I can tell that he started to learn a lot more throughout the course of the season, especially when it came to his plate discipline. That was something that I kept repeatedly saying that I wanted to see more of from him and have him grow and improve in, is that plate discipline and not being so swing happy and being willing to wait for his pitch. So I was happy to see him start to get a little bit better at that throughout the course of the season. But I still found myself saying late in the season, why did he swing at that pitch? That was not a good pitch, and it wasn't even close to the strike zone. So I want to have less of those moments when Rafaela is hitting in 2025. I want to have more moments where I'm saying, wow, we have 7, 8, and 9 in the order up in the 9th inning here, but Rafaela is in the 9 hole and he has a really good chance to get on base. Whereas in the past, I would find myself saying, maybe he will, but I'm not feeling overly confident. I want him to get to the point where I'm saying, I am very confident that Rafaela hitting in the 9 hole can be positive for this Red Sox team because he can get on base to then get back to Jarren Duran in the lineup. Like, I want to feel like he is the 9 hitter that can get it back to the top of the order. So I have high expectations for him going into 2025. And the reason he has a lot to prove is because a lot of people liked what they saw from him as a rookie in multiple areas of his game. But if he can't improve on offense, it really takes away a lot of the appeal of the player that Ceddanne Rafaela is. I think he works really hard. I think he has a great shot at being a guy who can be one of the best players on the team overall if he just gets a little bit better on offense and he's able to hit more consistently. So that's another player to me that has a ton to prove for the Boston Red Sox in 2025. And at the end of the day, going into the season, the players have to perform. They are the ones that take the field and the ones that go out there every day and try to make something happen. And if the players aren't performing, there's not much that the front office can do because that's not on them, that's on the players. So hopefully these guys who I talked about on today's show are able to go out there and have big seasons and really prove themselves and prove, hey, I belong here and I deserve to be here. So like I always say, we just have to keep the faith and hope that that will happen. I do appreciate you tuning in to Locked On Red Sox and making that your first listen for today. For your second listen, you can tune into Locked On MLB with host Paul Sullivan, aka Sully, who is so funny and energetic and super knowledgeable about everything going on across baseball. So if you want to stay up to date in all things going on around the league, he certainly is your guy. You can find his show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and you can check that out right after this. As always, keep the faith, go Red Sox, and I will catch you on the flip side.